Just recently, as according to the New York Times, on September 5th, 2025, Donald Trump has just made it so that drug trafficking drug trafficking organizations are now to be considered terrorist organizations. With this, it now means that the U.S. military is actually capable of using hostile force against all of these sort of drug trafficking gangs that have now been taking many instances as as drugs are heavily passing a lot through the southern border of the United States of America. Yet, now, as according to this, and with this, as according to the CSIS, or the Central Security of Central System of Security in the United States, this now means that this is now leading the U.S. in order to using its army and deploying it across the Caribbean now to effectively remove these sort of these drug trafficking gangs. And so just recently, that now there's actually 10 F-35 fighter jets and 6 F-15 fighter jets that actually have been sent down south to eliminate and completely eviscerate some drug trafficking ships that we actually may or may not even know are actually drug trafficking ships. Just based on what the U.S. has seen, that's what they're trying to fight against. But this leads us into today's question. Is the U.S.'s current attempts under war on drugs going to have an effect on its neighboring nations? And the answer is absolutely yes, for 3 key reasons. First of all, it's going to lead to potential civilians losing their lives. Second of all, it'll be leading towards many negative assessments towards the country as a whole. And third and finally, these countries might unite together against the U.S. one way or another. On to the first reason being that the U.S. might accidentally get thousands of citizens in. So, as according to Pacific Central, in which it records activities around the Pacific Ocean, very specifically in the Caribbean at least, it seems that thousands of troops have actually been sent down to these Central American countries in order to search out and seek these places where many of these illegal drugs are actually being concocted or created and are being sent up north toward the U.S. And with this, it actually seems to be causing major issues, as many of these, as now these drug trafficking organizations are now considered terrorist organizations, and the U.S.'s army is actually capable of using hostile force against them. Knowing the U.S. actually just sent in these thousands of soldiers without much planning, with the goal of seek and destroy. Yet they haven't really done so much as seeking, and have only just been sent out destroying. Which seems that it potentially could lead towards an issue where there are thousands of potential citizens of these Caribbean countries that may accidentally end up losing their lives just because they've been deemed as drug manufacturing or drug dealing. And so, on to second reason, in the fact that it'll greatly affect the relations within these nations. So, as these countries are unfortunately getting thousands of soldiers already sent in, it seems that they're not going to take it so lightly. So, as according to the Atlantic Central, where it's a newspaper that would track trade around the Atlantic Ocean, apparently it seems that Russia and China actually have considerable influence in the Caribbean and the Central America countries, and they actually have been more focusing against the U.S. in a much more economic way. China and Russia have been trying to make economic ties with these countries, but trying to make large trade organizations that would be focused against the U.S. With this, it would make it so that the U.S. would actually be less likely to trade with these countries in the future, and more likely to have these countries trade with Russia and China, who of which are currently growing powerhouses, and potentially in the future could could become actual threats in the U.S. to the U.S. not just militarily but actually economically. And third and finally, this issue has actually unfortunately gone larger than what the U.S. has actually expected itself to be. So, with these drugs being created over a wide variety of economic, of wide variety of countries within the Caribbean, and the fact that there's many countries that are, the fact that China and Russia are also getting involved, it seems that it's well out of scope. So, funny enough, actually, according to BBC News, that many of the base ingredients of these drugs are actually coming from China. And even though it is illegal in China, they are unfortunately able to stop all these. As such activity of monitoring and production of these drugs is quite hard to do within these Central American countries, as law enforcement isn't as strong compared to the U.S. or other powers. And so with this, it unfortunately seems that the U.S. is trying to step in and clean up for these Caribbean and Central American countries, even though they probably have much better problems on their hands to worry about. And additionally, it seems that on these economic ties with Russia and China, these Caribbean countries have actually been holding a bit more than that. Venezuela just recently has actually bought several anti-air missiles from Russia in a whopping deal worth $10 billion. At this rate, if they keep up, Venezuela might end up becoming a small threat within the Caribbean, and this idea may unfortunately spread out towards the Caribbean, unfortunately leading towards something similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis that we've actually seen before. And so, as Donald Trump wants to spread out its current plan of invading going through the entirety of the Caribbean and the Central America in order to wipe out as many drug dealing organizations as possible, it seems that if you were to actually do this, there would be many reverberations towards countries out within these regions. First of all, it would greatly potential civilians in the thousands could get harmed or unfortunately lose their lives due to how American planning can be in outside countries. Second of all, it seems that the issue is also a lot larger than hand, and the U.S. might unfortunately be unable to properly deal with it. And third and finally, the U.S. unfortunately is fighting against trying to solve issues in countries that are backed by Russia and China, as we currently see in this current economic stance. And so, as Donald Trump is trying to wipe out all these drug dealing organizations, it seems that if he keeps up at this rate, things will go very much in favor against him. Thank you.